Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. Today's 11th of August, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, kicking off today's episode is a bit of regulatory news. So, today the SEC announced that they have settled with Bittrex Incorporated here. They fined them, I believe, $24 million, but Bittrex didn't admit to any wrongdoing or anything like that. Now, I think the best take I saw came from Rodrigo, who does legal and policy at Paradigm here, where he said, the Bittrex settlement, like the Wahi settlement before it, is effectively a total capitulation by the SEC that makes you wonder why they even brought this case in the first place. For context, the SEC sued Bittrex after a 6-year investigation and once the company had already entered bankruptcy. They also sued the founder individually and alleged he had made over $130 million in compensation from running the exchange, yet they settled with no admission of guilt for a $24 million penalty payable by the already bankrupt company. And this is kind of funny to me because I've said for a while now that I believe the SEC has basically turned into a mob, and the fines that these companies pay is really just protection money, because who exactly did the SEC protect in this scenario, right? They fined Bittrex $24 million, which is already bankrupt, right? They alleged that the founder, the founder themselves, made over $130 million from this. So, I mean, there's no one being protected here. There's no kind of like victims, it seems, from this. It's just the SEC seemingly going after a company like this, especially after such a long investigation, and just settling with them because they know that they're probably not going to fight it, right? Because they're already bankrupt, so they're just going to pay a fine, and the SEC gets to basically write that down as a win. But again, they didn't protect anyone. It's not a win because there was no admission of guilt or anything. It was literally just a fine that was paid. So, you know, legally speaking, it really just was a fine. And as I said, it definitely looks like a protection racket going on here, like where you pay protection money, or else, you know, they'll burn down your business. But in this case, the business was already burnt down, and I guess like now it's being paid out of the bankruptcy kind of claims here. It's just wild, right? This is just kind of more of the bullshit the SEC is doing and continuing to do here, and why I said before that I strongly believe now, especially post the Ripple kind of result, that Coinbase is definitely going to win their case against the SEC. I don't know if Coinbase would actually settle for a fine, because even if that included not admitting to any wrongdoing or anything like that, I think Coinbase at least is very ideological driven in this kind of pursuit. So you can imagine a scenario where the SEC says to Coinbase, "Hey, we'll leave you alone if you pay us like $100 million or something as a fine, and you know you don't have to admit any wrongdoing, but just pay us the fine, basically, right?" And that's basically what they did with Bittrex here, right? And I don't think Coinbase would do that. Yes, it would probably make Coinbase's life easier, but it wouldn't kind of further their goal, which is getting regulatory clarity passed through Congress in the US. Like, that is their ultimate goal, right? And that's a big reason why they're fighting this. But I mean, another reason why they're fighting it obviously is because it's their business on the line as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm very confident that Coinbase is going to win their suit against the SEC generally. But yeah, the SEC continues to act more like a mob than any kind of, I guess, institution that protects investors here, because I don't see any investors being protected from this result with Bittrex. All right, on to some positive news today. So, another major fintech company that has been quite involved with Ethereum kind of development for a little while now and building on Ethereum is Visa. Now, I remember I highlighted a few things from them over the years, one of them being they were interested in building a layer 2 network on Ethereum. Like a Visa Layer 2 network. They also had some stuff they were doing earlier that I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember there was some other stuff they were doing. But today they have shared their experimental solution for paying on-chain gas fees with a Visa card. Now, the reason why this is very exciting is because essentially what they're doing is that they're abstracting away Ethereum gas fees using a Visa card. So the TLDR of how this works is down here, where they say, our experimental implementation they start off by saying our solution places a paymaster at the core. A paymaster is a specialized smart contract that can sponsor gas fees for user contract accounts. This solution frees users from needing to hold or bridge native blockchain tokens just to cover gas fees. So the solution itself is detailed in this kind of thread and little diagram here, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But the ultimate, I guess, like end result here is that people with a Visa card would be able to pay the gas fees owed using money already on their Visa card. So they wouldn't have to acquire ETH to do this. ETH would still be paid ultimately at the settlement layer, at the Ethereum layer, but this is the abstraction layer that I've been talking about on the refuel for quite a while now, where essentially the gas fees would be extracted away from the end user here, which is very, very cool, because that is the way to mass adoption, right? That is the way to getting more and more people on chain, making sure that they can pay for their fees and whatever they want to. Because like, imagine a world where everyone's just using stable coins, right? Well, obviously, if you're using stable coins as your kind of unit of account, as your money, like USDC or USDT or PayPal stablecoin, you're not going to want to have to make sure that you still have ETH for gas fees on your payment account. Maybe you invested in ETH somewhere else and you have it in cold storage or something like that, or it's on a centralized exchange or whatever, but you're not going to want to have to keep going back and forth and being like, oh, do I have enough ETH in here to do my grocery shopping, for example? Let's think more further into the future here. So that's where Visa comes in and basically says, well, no, you can still use your Visa card with your stable coins or whatever tokens you basically want, and we'll just abstract away the gas fees for you. We'll just let you pay the gas fees in whatever kind of token that you want. Obviously, stablecoins would be very popular to do this, and they'll handle that in the back end using their Paymaster web service here. So as I said, you can learn more about this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. And there's also a verifying Paymaster contract on the Ethereum Girly testnet right now, so you can check out the contract yourself. And they were able to, and Visa was able to successfully send user operations with off-chain gas fee payments, which you can see actually linked here on the Girly testnet, which is very, very cool to see. I'll link that in the YouTube description below as well for you to check out. But yeah, just another, I guess, big kind of company, big fintech company building on Ethereum, right? Like, as I said, we had PayPal, now we have Visa. I know MasterCard has done a bunch of experiments on this as well. There's various banks doing experiments around stablecoins. Ethereum really is quickly becoming that global settlement layer that I've been talking about for quite a while now, where essentially all these big companies trusted enough to start building on it and start putting into and start testing with it, and hopefully kind of productionizing some of this stuff so that their existing user base, obviously Visa has a massive user base, right, can get the benefits out of this. So it's kind of funny when you look at it like this and look at how fast it seems to be happening, because I think that there's just a confluence of things, right? The infrastructure is there. The kind of like the trust is there, right? The reliability is there. As I said before, the merge was a massive de-risking event for Ethereum generally, not just for ETH staking, not just for Ethereum on-chain kind of like stuff that us Ethereans do and us crypto natives do, but also for companies outside of the Ethereum ecosystem that may want to use Ethereum. So yeah, very, very cool to see this. You can check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Parathosh has detailed the new Holesky testnet that I've talked about a bunch on the refuel before, and what the plans are for this. So this will be a long-lived testnet that is replacing Sepolia, that will launch roughly on September 15th, which of course is the first anniversary of the merge. So Parathosh continues and says, we've had 2 coordination calls, and the testnet aims to give client teams a platform to test clients at a larger scale than mainnet, and for home stakers to test their setups without risks. So Parathosh continues and says that Girly is currently the biggest testnet with 500,000 validators, but Holesky will be launching with, I believe, 1.4 million validators. So around double the current mainnet validators, and obviously almost triple the current Girly validators. And that is being done because they want to stress test the Ethereum consensus mechanism. They want to stress test the network on this testnet, especially as concerns have arisen around what these kind of what the Ethereum network looks like when we have 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million validators. What does that look like for especially home stakers and people running software, running hardware such as a Raspberry Pi or Rock 5B, on networks where they may not have a lot of upload bandwidth as well. So that's all kind of going to be informed by this. And I've talked about before how there are plans in place in order to reduce the number of validators on the network while still maintaining the same security. It's just that instead of someone having to run like 20 validators, they could run one, because they could consolidate all of their stake into one validator, and you would still get the same security guarantees and everything, because it's the same ETH stake, but the bandwidth cost would go down, the overhead on the network would go down generally, and we would make a much healthier, stable, and secure network by doing that there. So you can check out Parathosh's thread here for more details on the new Holesky testnet that will be hopefully launched around September 15th, which isn't too far away now. It's actually just over a month away now, which is coming up fast here. 1 year almost since the merge. Man, how time flies, right? Even in a bear market. But anyway, you can check out this thread. We'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, speaking of Ethereum validators, Superfears updated us today and said the Beacon Chain churn limit has increased to 11 validators per epoch, or every 6.4 minutes. This effectively means we're adding one validator every 35 seconds. Now you can check this out at validatorq.com or whenmerge.com. It will track the kind of entry queue and exit queue for you. You can see here that the entry queue has come down quite a bit. You know, we were persistently above 80, 90,000 validators for a little while there, but now we're down to only 67,000 pending validators, and the wait time is just under a month at 27 days here. And as Superfears mentioned, the churn is now 11 validators per epoch, which means that there is one validator being added every 35 seconds. So, and you can see how on this site, validatorq.com, the trend over time of the entry and exit queue and what it's kind of looked like. It's kind of funny because I think that everyone kind of FOMO'd in after withdrawals were enabled, and now we're kind of tapering off. But I actually think that's a good thing. I would rather us not add too many more validators before we have those kind of like improvements in place to make sure that the network can handle these validators. Because I think that the amount of people staking, the amount of validators coming online caught the Ethereum core developers and researchers off guard a little bit, because I think that they expected this to happen at a slower pace, but it's obviously happened a lot faster, and those solutions that have been in the works for a little while probably going to need to go live sooner rather than later here. But yeah, thanks to Superfears for shouting this out and kind of like highlighting this. And as I said, you can check out whenmerge.com as well. They have various metrics around this. This is a very cool art here, actually. You can see on my screen for the Cancun upgrade, or the Dencun upgrade, that's coming with EIP 4844. This is really cool artwork. I've long said to some people who have asked me if I would ever get a tattoo that if I did, it would be an ETH tattoo, and I would only do it when ETH got to 10K, and it would have to be something funky like this, right? Where you've got kind of like a Day of the Dead themed ETH logo. Like maybe I'd get it on my arm or something, like upper arm or something like that. But yeah, that's the only tattoo. I don't have any tattoos right now, but that's pretty much the only tattoo I would consider getting is an ETH tattoo, and probably at 10K to celebrate the fact that, you know, I've been saying that I think ETH is going to 10K since 2019. If it happens in like, 2024 or 2025, it'll be like 5 or 6 years since I've been saying that. So yeah, I think I deserve to get a tattoo. Anyway, I'm ranting. I'm going off topic here. Anyway, you can check all this out in the YouTube description. Moving on, the protocol guild has been updated, and the splits registry, the member registry has changed. They have added 13 new members and removed 3, with all weights adjusted here. So this is the 5th quarterly update since their launch in May 2022. And as the tweet says here, consistency is key to the protocol guild maintaining its legitimacy as a commons funding tool. Now you can view in-depth financial dashboards here, which I've for the protocol guild, which I've showcased before, about what this looks like. So you can actually see who the donations, who's getting the donations, like what addresses they're going to, what their kind of share is, and that's down here. You can see here member weights and funding at current value, and you can see each member, their weight, and how much has been distributed based on the current value and what's kind of vesting out to them, and the total looks pretty good. It looks like this is doing a really great job here, because it seems to be that they're getting, I think this is since May 2022, so it's just over a year. The top members seem to have gotten for a total amount so far of $220,000. So that is really great, on top of what they already get, because I'm sure a lot of them are working within the ecosystem and getting paid for their work, but this is like a bonus on top of that from the community paying out to them here. So yeah, the Protocol Guild, as you guys know, is one of my favorite initiatives in the Ethereum ecosystem. It really just speaks to everything that I stand for and everything that I think Ethereum stands for. But this dashboard is amazing, so you should definitely go check this out. I will link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Coinbase Ventures has some exciting news that they announced yesterday, or today, I guess. They have purchased RPL tokens, I think more RPL tokens from the RocketPool team. I think they have done this before, and as you guys know, Coinbase is also an ODAO member here. But the coolest thing isn't that they purchased RPL tokens. The coolest thing is that they plan to spin up several hundred nodes on the RocketPool network using Unit 4, 4110 here. They've kind of link to their Twitter account here. That to me is much cooler than them buying RPL. Obviously, buying RPL is a requirement for being able to stake with the RocketPool network, because you need to collateralize each mini pool with some RPL, and that's exactly what Coinbase Ventures is doing here. So very cool for them to be doing this, especially because they run a staking service, right? Coinbase runs its own staking service. I mean, they are number, what, 3 or something, or 2 in terms of market share. I'm just bringing it up here. They're actually 2, yeah. So they're number 2, just only behind Lido here as the entity that has the most share on the network, and they're at 10%. Now, it kind of begs the question of like, if they're running these validators, does it get counted under RocketPool or does it get counted under Coinbase? I mean, I think it gets counted under RocketPool, right? Because they're running it as part of the RocketPool network. They're not running it as Coinbase. They're not minting CB ETH against it or anything like that. So it definitely goes under RocketPool here. So running several hundred kind of like validators here is very awesome, or several hundred nodes, I should say, is very awesome. So I guess like kudos to Coinbase for continuing to push here and push decentralization of Ethereum staking, even though it kind of goes against their interest, right? Because they already have, as I said, their own staking service, which is a pretty big one, 10% of the network right now. So yeah, very cool to see this from Coinbase Ventures. So a really interesting announcement out of DeBank today. So for those of you who don't know what DeBank is, it is a Web3 portfolio tracker. And what they've announced today is something called DeBank Chain, which is an OP stack chain. So they're building a layer 2 on Ethereum here. So the testnet is live today, and they're planning to launch their mainnet in 2024. And they're calling this the asset layer for social. So essentially, what this kind of seems to be is that they're going to be supporting, they say here, the new account system supports transactions signed with dedicated L2 private key, reducing the use of L1 private keys in social scenarios and enhancing the security of users' L1 assets. So essentially trying to create, I guess, this account abstraction wallet at layer 2 and account abstraction experience at layer 2 using the DeBank portfolio tracker and kind of wallet service here. There is more info, I guess, on how to get involved in the thread where they say here how to try out the testnet with Rabby. Rabby wallet has integrated the DeBank testnet and features a built-in gas faucet, so every Rabby user can easily access the test gas. The open source code is available on GitHub, of course, and there is also an Explorer live right now for you to go check out. Now, I kind of find this funny because I guess even just like maybe 12 months ago, if someone was launching a new chain, they would launch it as an L1, right? They would fork Geth or something and launch it as an L1. But as I've said for quite a while now, once the L2 infrastructure got to a point where it was very easy for people to spin up their own L2 chains, they would almost certainly, 9 times out of 10, pretty much almost 10 times out of 10, choose to go the L2 route rather than the L1 route. And I've said this for various different reasons, obviously because I believe it's cheaper. Economically, it's definitely kind of easier to do. You don't have to worry about spinning up kind of like issuing a token and kind of like paying out validators and stuff like that. And you can just use existing infrastructure like the OP stack to enable you to launch this L2 here. So that makes probably over 10 chains that I've seen using the OP stack right now. As I've said before, I don't think there's going to be huge amounts of these L2s that are super successful, but it's still great to see that happening as an L2 rather than L1, as I've wanted to see happen for quite a while now. I think we're all sick of L1s at this point. We're probably going to get sick of L2s as well, to be fair. But yeah, I'd much rather see this than the kind of continuation of all the L1 crap that's been going on for many years now, unfortunately. But yeah, you can check out DeBank's tweet thread. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, speaking of rollups and L2s, I put out a rather cryptic tweet on Twitter today where I said, rollups unlock the long tail of apps. Now, when I usually put out these tweets, I do expand on them on the refuel, as you guys know. I'm not just putting out these cryptic tweets to like be cryptic on purpose. It's more just a springboard for me to talk about this stuff on the refuel here. But what I mean by this is that I've discussed this on the refuel before, but basically, what ended up happening with Ethereum L1 is that because it's so limited in its available block space and because it's in such high demand, every single app except the highest value apps get pushed off. So what takes up the most kind of block space on Ethereum L1? Well, of course, it is DeFi, right? It's everything financial. It's speculative, because at the end of the day, the speculative apps command the most amount of money, because you're more than happy to pay $1,000 for a transaction. You're more than happy to pay $100 transaction fee if your expected value from that fee is like $1,000, right? Whereas obviously the apps that aren't speculative or aren't as speculative, the apps that have a, I guess, lower speculative base, if you want to call it that, get priced out and get pushed away to traditionally other layer ones, but now to L2s and rollups. So what I mean by rollups unlocking the long tail of apps, it basically unlocks all the apps that have been priced out of layer one, essentially. And a good example of this is something that actually launched today called FriendTech. And you may have seen it on Twitter. You may have seen people talking about it. I tweeted about it with some invite codes for people. I don't have any more invite codes, by the way, so please don't ask me right now. But essentially what it is, it's like, if you guys remember BitClout, BitClout launched a little while ago. It was this layer one social token thing where essentially you could buy tokens in your favorite influencers and the token price would go up, and then it would give you access to things. With FriendTech, it gives you access to an exclusive chat room with the person, right? So it's that. But that is on base. It's on the layer 2 network. It's on base's rollup. It is not on layer 1. It would never work on layer 1. It would get very, very quickly priced out of layer 1 because there's no way to do any kind of microtransactions. It costs too much in gas. People would get really annoyed that it was costing them so much to do anything on there. It's not one of those apps that a speculative at the base, and speculative. I mean, it obviously is speculative in nature because you're buying and selling shares of these influencers, but generally it doesn't command a speculative premium like something like DeFi does, right? So that kind of app works very well on a rollup. And then there's all these other apps that work well, like decentralized social media, like Lens, for example. I know that's on the Polygon POS chain right now, but that's going to exist on the Polygon ZK Validium when they launch that. Which is when they transition the POS chain to a Validium. So it's going to be an L2. So all these apps that just weren't able to be done at layer 1 are being unlocked at layer 2. And this is what I think a lot of people miss, is that layer 2 does not just offer faster transactions and lower gas fees, but by offering faster transactions and lower gas fees, it enables the creation of all these apps and the adoption of all these apps that just aren't possible on Ethereum layer 1. And that's exactly what we've seen with, as I said, something like FriendTech, with other social apps out there, other less speculative apps out there, and also the long tail of things like NFTs. You know, think about all the NFTs that are worth very, very little, but people don't want to trade them on layer 1 because the gas fee is worth more than the actual NFT. And Immutable actually had this issue with Gods Unchained cards, where a lot of those trading cards for the Gods Unchained game were worth very little. They were worth, 10 cents, 15 cents or something like that. And the gas fee was obviously more than that in order to trade these things or to even move them around, right? So they were a pioneer of layer 2s with Immutable X, working with Starkware to launch that, and that enabled the creation of not just the adoption of Gods Unchained, but also the creation of a lot more games on chain and a lot more games with NFTs that are at rather low value. Not everything's going to be valued as highly as a CryptoPunk, for example, and that's what you need these things for, and that's why rollups unlock that long tail of apps there. So yeah, anyway, hopefully that explains that little, I guess, relatively cryptic tweet that I put out on Twitter today. All right, so Justin Thaler here, who is a research partner at A16Z Crypto, has shared an article introducing something called Lasso and Jolt, which are two new works that he hopes will change how SNARKS are designed and built. Now, this is one for the cryptographers out there, or the people interested in cryptography and SNARKS. SNARKS is something that Vitalik has been talking about for quite a while now, and is definitely something that is super exciting in the zero knowledge space. So if that interests you, I just wanted to highlight this for you in case you missed it. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. You can give this a read. But yeah, I saw a lot of people getting really excited about this. These Lasso and Jolt works and what they mean for SNARKS generally. So yeah, I'll link this in the YouTube description below. You can go check it out. All right, so Stephen Goldfeder, one of the co-founders of Offchain Labs, put out a tweet today where he said, this is the Arbitrum tech cheat sheet. So Nitro is the only EVM rollup stack with fraud proofs, which is correct, the OP stack does not have fraud proofs right now. Bold, which is tech that are developed to open validation for all on Arbitrum chains. Stylus, which is basically allowing people to code smart contracts in languages other than Solidity, such as Rust, C, C++, and leading to 50 to 100 times gas savings, and Orbit, which is their tech stack to permissionlessly launch your own L3. just thought this was a really great tweet to basically summarize exactly what the Arbitrum ecosystem is right now, right? It's not just Arbitrum 1, it's not just Arbitrum Nova, it's also all this other tech that's being built around it, and I guess like in the Arbitrum orbit, so to speak. And I think Orbit is interesting because it's taking a different approach to some of these other teams. Obviously, Optimism has OP Stack, Polygon has their own roll your own layer 2 stack, or roll your own ZK rollup stack, same with ZK Sync and some other projects out there. Whereas Arbitrum has gone a different way where they're like, yes, you can launch your own chain, but launch it as an L3 on top of the existing L2, Arbitrum 1 or maybe Arbitrum Nova or stuff like that. And I think by doing it that way, it's a differentiator from the way everyone else is doing it, which you guys know I'm a big fan of, and I think that unlocks even more innovation that we would have seen from everyone just doing the same thing. And it's similar to what Starkware is doing with Starknet, not trying to be non-EVM and stuff like that. So I'm always down for encouraging that sort of stuff in the ecosystem, and always excited to see that kind of play out here. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to highlight that tweet there. All right, so Lyra V2 is something that has been talked about a little bit recently on Twitter, and I've kind of talked about it on Refuel before. But the Lyra Twitter account published a new blog post today called Lyra V2 the DEX for Pro Traders. So there's a tweet thread as well that accompanies this and explains exactly what Lyra V2 is and all the improvements coming to it. You'll remember that Lyra V2 is actually going to be launched as its own OP stack chain as well here. So it's basically taking on DYDX, I guess, from that kind of point of view here, and trying to essentially basically be that DEX for pro traders, as they describe here. They've been live for quite a while as Lyra V1. They started on Optimism, then they moved to Arbitrum. Now they're going with V2, and they're basically creating their own chain. So if you want to read more details about that, I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. And apologies if it seems like I'm powering through these updates here, just because I realize I'm coming up on time. So next update, Zapper has introduced something called Trends. So now you can discover the top things people are doing on-chain across DeFi, swaps, NFTs, and much more. So essentially, any address that you're watching, it'll give you a nice interface within Zapper to see what those addresses are doing. So have they swapped, what NFT have they minted, what contracts have they interacted with, all that sorts of stuff. Which is available to you in the Zapper interface for yourself. Oh, I just saw myself there actually in the video. Here, where is it? Yeah, here we go. It says Sassel used this RocketPool, used 102 times in the last hour. I don't know if that's accurate or what that's tracking there, but yeah, I just spotted myself. But yeah, this just keeps track of everything people are doing on, I guess, their public addresses here, or any address that you want to monitor. So you can go check that out in the Zapper interface for yourself. You just have to go to the Zapper website to do that. All right, last thing to discuss here was another tweet that I put out today about ICO. So I said, I really think we threw the baby out with the bathwater when we abandoned ICOs. The concept of a crowd fund is sound, it's just that unfortunately the execution of almost all ICOs was horrible. They were scams or pump and dumps. I'm still hopeful that one day we get well-executed ICOs. So when you really think about it, some of the biggest projects in this ecosystem were ICOs. And obviously the granddaddy of this is Ethereum, right? Ethereum was really one of the first, if not the first ICOs. I don't think it was technically the first, but it was definitely the biggest one at the time in 2014. And obviously it's blossomed into what it is today. And then we had a bunch of other ICOs happen in 2016 and 2017. As I said, most of them were scams and pump and dumps and didn't really go anywhere. But there were other successful ones, like RocketPool was actually an ICO, right? And a few others out there, Synthetics, Aave, which was ETHLend at the time. So there has been some successful ones, but the vast majority weren't successful. But as a reaction to the ICO bubble of 2017, what ended up happening was that there was a brief kind of like period of 2018, even 2019, where people were doing IDOs, or initial kind of like exchange, or IEOs, I should say, initial exchange offerings, essentially. And there was IDOs, which is initial DEX offering. As I said, those were kind of done in 2018, 2019, 2020, but nowhere near the same extent of ICOs. But then as just a general reaction to ICOs, we abandoned them, right? We stopped doing them. And then everyone just started raising from VCs and angels and insiders for their kind of projects. And obviously I'm one of those angel investors who invest in these things. But the thing is that I would much rather be able to invest in these things on the public market where everyone could invest in them alongside me. Because I think that a lot of the insider allocation stuff is going to potentially lead to perverse outcomes down the line. It already has to some extent of some projects, but I generally just don't like that model. In saying that, the ICO model itself that was used in 2017, where it was basically just a free-for-all most of the time, I think that doesn't work fundamentally. Because why that doesn't work fundamentally, like at its core reason, there's many reasons, but the core reason is that you optimize for speculators in that environment, where if you open it up for everyone, the people who are buying it most of the time are just people who are going to flip it. And that's exactly what happened with the ICOs in 2017. So if you want to do a crowd fund where you literally want to do it because you want to issue a token, you also want to raise money to build the project out, then what you actually need is a better way to filter out who can actually invest. And this is why it went to VCs and angel investors. It doesn't necessarily mean that these people are better investors than the public, but you can vet them a lot easier, right? You know who they are. They've got a name attached to them, and all that, and all the stuff that comes with that, right? And you can do KYC on them and everything like that. But ICOs generally didn't do that. There were some that did KYC, but people didn't really like that. So what other way could we filter people into these ICOs? What other way could ICOs optimize for people who are actually aligned? Well, there's many different ways of doing that. There is a world of on-chain data that these projects could use if they really wanted to, but that's not the only issue here. The other issue is the regulatory side of things. As Ari Paul notes here, he says that, he agreed with me, but there's big gaps in the tech and legal tooling to close before the ICOs can become a net positive again. And I agree with that. Definitely, if you did a token sale right now in the US, it would probably be deemed illegal, right? I mean, it would definitely be deemed an illegal securities offering by the SEC. So obviously, that's another reason why ICOs also died, is because from a regulatory standpoint, it is not very palatable for these teams to do this, especially in the US. But I think that if we can come up with a framework for filtering the right people to get into your ICO and to be able to contribute to your ICO, I think we can have much more successful ICOs than we have had in the past, because all that happens right now is that the projects default to VCs and angel investors because they're easy to filter, they're easy to vet. There's not really any regulatory risk there, because you can KYC AML them, you just accept accredited investors, so it's all well and good. And then you do like your SAFT, which is your simple agreement for future tokens, and you convert the equity into tokens, and then you're mostly shielded from kind of like the regulatory stuff here, because you're not doing anything with regular retail non-accredited investors. So it is definitely a failure of policy and a failure of the regulatory regime, specifically in the US, but also other places around the world. But I think it's also a failure of lack of imagination, lack of being a lack of looking at things on chain and filtering addresses, because you wouldn't really filter people, you would filter addresses. And being able to get the people into your fundraise that you actually think are going to be long-term aligned with you, that aren't going to just dump the token as soon as they get it. And actually with ICOs, a lot of the time, there wasn't any vesting either, which was very bad. Obviously, it lent itself to speculators. So there obviously needs to be vesting. But I generally have a problem with vesting, even how it's done in the kind of like VC funding world, where it's time-based vesting and not milestone-based. Because with time-based vesting, people still get their tokens even if the project ends up being a failure, and they still make money from it. Whereas milestone-based vesting is much better, because essentially you don't get the tokens until the milestones are hit, right? And this is traditionally how it works in the, I guess, like non-crypto world, where a lot of the bonuses that are paid out to executives, specifically, not so much investor kind of like vesting, but executive bonuses, stuff like that, are done based on milestones. So we could do that with vesting through, and if we did an ICO that was able to filter through the people that the project wanted to include, then they could do vesting as well on top of that, and it would be milestone based, so that everyone's kind of aligned and everyone can kind of get positive outcomes from this, instead of it just becoming a pump and dump fest, which is what we saw in 2017. So I think we can get there, but as Ari alluded to, need much more regulatory clarity. We also need much better ways to filter people on chain. Things like Ethereum attestation service is a good step. There are ID projects being worked on, all that sort of stuff that allow you to basically at least have relative certainty that the cybers, the people trying to cyber your ICO, aren't accepted in. And that you kind of like know the participants that you're getting into your round. And also, I know it's kind of difficult to do this, but let's just say you vet someone and they look amazing, on paper, so to speak, or based on their Ethereum address. You let them into your ICO, and then they just straight dump the token as soon as they get it. Well, now you can blacklist that address, right? The community can basically say, well, they just dumped it straight away. They're not going to be allowed into any other rounds. And then people will say, okay, well, someone can just spin up a new address. They can, but that new address no longer has the profile of that old address. So they probably won't get into any more rounds. So it just acts as a really great filtering mechanism in my mind, as long as there's a standard criteria that the community could agree upon in order to get this done and to see who you accept into your ICO. People will call this gatekeeping, but I don't think so. I just call it filtering out for high quality participants. I don't think that's gatekeeping. I think really what you're doing is ensuring that you have a good crowd fund, you have aligned members of your community, because if you don't do that, we saw what happened in 2017. It's just an ICO pump and dump fest with scams everywhere, and we don't want that again, obviously. So yeah, anyway, that's my comments on that. And wow, I went way over 35 minutes. Just last up here, I'm attending another meetup in Melbourne. So I've got one this week, or next week, I guess, coming up, the Oz DeFi one in Melbourne. And then the week after that, I'll be attending another one, so on the 24th of August at Upside DAO. So you can go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But I'll be speaking at both of them. And I hope to see any Melbourne-based or even Aussie-based people there at these meetups. They're going to be a really great time. But on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all next week. Thanks everyone.